One, we're on air. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of day, folks. Thank you for joining the largest and the fastest growing large scale Scrum community of New York City, though it has gone viral and global. Today, we have a special guest, not for the first time here, I believe, as a participant, but also as a presenter this time, the well-respected and known Tom Mellor, who is a certified Scrum trainer since 2008, who was personally mentored at one point by Ken Schwaber himself, one of the co-creators of Scrum, and also at Ken's invitation at one point, Tom was serving as a board of directors for the Scrum Alliance 2008 and 2010, including being the chair of the board around the same year. And we do kindly ask you all keep your mics off. Now, more about Tom. He's an employee of a Fortune 50 US business companies and has introduced Scrum into the company even back in 2004, where he incubated the agility and, then of course he left the company at one point in 2013. Tom has served as a Scrum Master and member on many occasions and has delivered certified Scrum Master workshops and certified Scrum Master training to many people. Over 375 CSM and CSPO workshop have been delivered by Tom over the decade. And as a certified Scrum trainer, he has taught more than 5,500 people. And now today's recording, and of course, Tom will have the floor in a second. He will tell you all about it, will be posted on the dedicated page along with Tom's materials and some additional assets about him, his work, his training, and himself. And I'll be sharing the link throughout the presentation. My kind ask, do keep your mics off. Just keep them off. Use the chat window to discuss matters. If so, there's something for Tom, please proceed your question with, make it short and succinct to the point. And make sure you have a prefix like question for Tom. And I'll try to do I'll sanitize the chat and I'll bring it to his attention. Okay. Without any further ado, Tom, I'm going to pass it on to you. Thank you very much for coming out here and doing this for us. So the floor is yours.
No problem, Gene. And Murphy has showed up in a complex system and my camera has stopped working. So, and I don't have time, nor am I willing to do any kind of diagnostic. So you get to look at the grizzly bear for the duration.
Very good.
Which is probably better than looking at me. So,
well, yeah, as long as you can save on bandwidth. Go ahead. Yep.
I'm going to share my screen so that people can see. And I assume you're going to be able to see this.
Yep.
So that you can see the slides. And I when Gene asked me to do this, I'll be the first to admit I've never created a slide presentation for these topics. They're integrated into my Scrum Master and Product Owner training, but I've never created a presentation solely dedicated to what I call the three thinkings of agility. So I threw these together, admittedly, and they're fundamentally pretty basic. So I apologize if anybody thinks there ought to be a lot of graphics. Just didn't really get into the graphic side of it. So let's see. And Gene mentioned a little bit about me. So this is some contact information for me. You're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want. I'm not very active on Twitter, but that's my Twitter handle. And if you really need to know anything about what I teach or when I teach, that sort of thing, probably the Scrum Alliance is the best place to go. I don't operate my own website for training. I don't do enough training really to justify that anymore. So anyway, you can go out to the Scrum Alliance. My profile's out there, and any classes that I'm teaching will be listed on the site. Here's the agenda today. We've got a little less than an hour, so we're going to look at some background and essentials of what I call, again, the three thinkings related to agile-oriented product development and wicked problem solving. And those three thinkings are design thinking, lean. A lot of people don't put the word thinking after lean, but I do. Lean thinking and systems thinking. We'll talk a little bit at the end about the relationships of the three thinkings to each other, any symbiotic relationship they might have, any other peculiarities about them. We're going to see two TED Talk videos from Tom Wujek. If you're familiar with Wujek, he's a design thinker. He's a consultant. He's done several TED Talks. Probably the one that he was most famous for at the beginning was the marshmallow exercise, where he demonstrated the effectiveness of iterative development in the creation of a tower made out of spaghetti and marshmallows. And that's been a widely popular exercise in team building venues, in teaching venues, etc. He's got a new one that we're going to look at called Making Toast. And it is interesting, and it's a departure from the emphasis about the actual creation of a tower using spaghetti and marshmallows, but he gets his point across on it. So we're going to see two TED Talk videos from him, total about 20 minutes. One's 11 minutes, the other's a little over 8. And then at the end, we'll have discussion, questions, and insights. I mentioned to Gene, maybe we would do an activity, but I don't think we're really going to have time to do that based on the demands of the discussion, the information, and the videos. So let's jump into the first thinking. These are in order of design, lean, and systems. The first one is design. If you're into design thinking, you probably appreciate that it really was created at IDEO. And it back in around 2000, well, it really started to emerge around 2006, 2007. There's a website there if you want to see more about the history of it. And if you've seen any of the IDEO videos, they're fascinating. The one about the shopping cart is an older video, but one that really emphasized the essence of design thinking. They have other videos out there as well. Design thinking really caught on in the education field. It's used heavily in curriculum design, especially at the advanced education levels at universities and colleges. It's also used in high school curriculum development and lower levels as well. It has found its way into business process development, business problem solving. Of course, we use the essence of it in product development and software development when iterative development emerged, iterative and incremental development emerged in the early 2000s. It wasn't necessarily appreciated as design thinking at the time, but the experimentation and exploration that goes on with design thinking is core to how we generally do product and software development. Again, universities have played a significant role. Many people have heard of the MIT Design Lab called MIT D Lab and the Stanford Design School. Both of those are quite famous. Northwestern University in Chicago's got the Siegel Design Institute, along the similar lines of the previous two, and Berkeley's got its innovation lab, the Haas Innovation Lab. I'm working with Illinois State University right now to set up an innovation hub at its school. And at the center of that innovation hub is going to be design thinking. So we're just in the early stages of setting that incubation hub up. And I recently took a design thinking workshop from Florida State University. We're using their innovation hub as somewhat of a model for the one that we're going to do at Illinois State University here in Illinois. So it's a little background on design thinking. Anybody familiar with design thinking understands the 5 fundamental steps of it. The first thing is to empathize, to appreciate the problem domain and your customer's problem. They use tools that we're familiar with, like personas and empathy maps. They're heavy into those types of tools, and we'll examine some of the tools in a little bit. After you develop an empathy relationship with the customer and user and the problem that is trying to be solved, then you go into defining the problem statement clearly. And a lot of times you'll brainstorm how you're going to define the problem, look at it from different attributes. There are, again, exercises that are created to help further elaborate on this step. Once you've got the once you define that problem clearly and accurately, then you start to ideate ways to solve the problem. This is where real brainstorming, real wisdom of crowds starts to come into the picture. Again, we'll look at some tools, and then we'll prototype potential solutions. Sometimes the prototyping is low fidelity, sometimes it's high fidelity. Sometimes it involves the creation of software, sometimes it doesn't. Curriculum development doesn't necessarily involve software, but it can involve pages about how you're going to deliver curriculum, things like that. So prototyping is an essential part. And then the testing, we don't think of this testing in the way that we think about it in software development necessarily, except from the standpoint that we probably might look at it similarly to user acceptance testing. So does the solution that is created or solutions created pass the usability test of the users or customers whose problem we're trying to solve? And we don't think of this as technical testing, but more as usability testing. And let's see, I added a 6th because Wojcik emphasizing making ideas visible, physically visible to people. And this is something that we're very familiar with in the way that we do work. Certainly the pandemic has created some problems with this, but it's still emphasized in how we make work visible, radiate information out, able to physically move things around, especially when we're mapping and doing things like that. I'm going to go ahead and show this video from, see if I can find it here. From Wojcik. It's about, this one is about 11 minutes, I think. So bear with me. Okay, here we go. And Gene, let me know if you can't hear it. Better optimize for sound here.
Not yet.
Yeah, I'm going to start here in a minute. Okay, here we go.
Several years ago, I was running a workshop for a group of high-level Hollywood visual effects producers. And the goal of the workshop was to identify breakthroughs in their production pipeline. And I started by asking the question, pick any pressing problem. And that's when Kyle put up his hand and said, my problem is I just don't have
Hold on, Gene. I started the wrong video. Let me start the right video.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I was like, wait a minute, that's not the correct video. Okay, let me try it again here.
Some years ago, I stumbled across a simple design exercise that helps people understand and solve complex problems. And like many of these design exercises, it kind of seems trivial at first, but under deep inspection, it turns out that it reveals unexpected truths about the way that we collaborate and make sense of things. The exercise has 3 parts, and it begins with something that we all know how to do, which is how to make toast. It begins with a clean sheet of paper, a felt marker, and without using any words, you begin to draw how to make toast. And most people draw something like this. They draw a loaf of bread, which is sliced, that put into a toaster. The toaster is then deposited for a course of time. It pops up, and then voila, after 2 minutes, toast and happiness. Now, over the years, I've collected many hundreds of drawings of these toasts, and some of them are very good because they really illustrate the toast-making process quite clearly. And then there are some that are, well, not so good. They really suck, actually, because you don't know what they're trying to say. Under close inspection, some reveal some aspects of toast making while hiding others. So there's some that's all about the toast, right? And there's all about the transformation of toast. And there's others that are all about the toaster, okay? And the engineers love to draw the mechanics of this. And then there are others that are about people. You know, it's about visualizing the experience that people have. And then there are others that are about the supply chain of making toast that goes all the way back to the store. It goes through the supply chain networks of teleportation and all the way back to the field and wheat. And that one actually goes all the way back to the Big Bang. So it's crazy stuff. But I think it's obvious that even though these drawings are really wildly different, they share a common quality, and I'm wondering if you can see it. Do you see it? What's common about these? So most drawings have nodes and links. So nodes represent the tangible objects like the toaster and people, and links represent the connections between the nodes. And it's the combination of links and nodes that produces a full systems model. And it makes our private mental models visible about how we think something works. So that's the value of these things. And what's interesting about these systems models is how they reveal our various points of view. So for example, Americans make toast with a toaster. That seems obvious. Whereas many Europeans make toast with a frying pan, of course. And many students make toast with a fire. I don't really understand this. A lot of MBA students do this. So you can measure the complexity by counting the number of nodes, and the average illustration has between 4 and 8 nodes. Less than that, the drawing seems trivial, but it's quick to understand. And more than 13, the drawing produces a feeling of map shock. It's too complex. So the sweet spot is between 5 and 13. So if you want to communicate something visually, have between 5 and 13 nodes in your diagram. So though we may not be skilled at drawing, the point is that we intuitively know how to break down complex things into simple things and then bring them back together again. So this brings us to our second part of the exercise, which is how to make toast, but now with sticky notes or with cards. So what happens then? Well, with cards, most people tend to draw clear, more detailed, and more logical notes. You can see the step-by-step analysis that takes place. And as they build up their model, they move their nodes around, kind of rearranging them like Lego blocks. Now, though this might seem trivial, it's actually really important. This rapid iteration of expressing and then reflecting and analyzing is really the only way in which we get clarity. It's the essence of the design process. And system theorists do tell us that the ease with which we can change a representation correlates to our willingness to improve the model. So sticky note systems are not only more fluid, they generally produce way more nodes than static drawings. The drawings are much richer. And this brings us to our third part of the exercise, which is to draw how to make toast, but this time in a group. So what happens then? Well, here's what happens. It starts out messy, and then it gets really messy, and then it gets messier. But as people refine the models, the best nodes become more prominent, and with each iteration, the model becomes clearer, and because people build on top of each other's ideas. What emerges is a unified systems model that integrates the diversity of everyone's individual points of view. And so that's a really different outcome from what usually happens in meetings, isn't it? So these drawings can contain 20 or more nodes, but participants don't feel map shock because they participate in the building of their models themselves. Now, what's also really interesting that the groups spontaneously mix and add additional layers of organization to it. To deal with contradictions, for example, they add branching patterns and parallel patterns. Oh, by the way, if they do it in complete silence, they do it much better and much more quickly. Really interesting. Talking gets in the way. So here's some key lessons that can emerge from this. First, drawing helps us understand the situations as systems with nodes and their relationships. Movable cards produce better systems models because we iterate much more fluidly. And then the group notes produce the most comprehensive models because we synthesize several points of view. So that's interesting. When people work together under the right circumstances, group models are much better than individual models. And so this approach works really great for drawing how to make toast. But what if you wanted to draw something more relevant or pressing, like your organizational vision, or customer experience, or long-term sustainability? There's a visual revolution that's taking place as more organizations are addressing their wicked problems by collaboratively drawing them out. And I'm convinced that those who see their world as movable nodes and links really have an edge. And the practice is really pretty simple. You start with a question, you collect the nodes, you refine the nodes, you do it over again, you refine and refine and refine, and the patterns emerge. And the group gets clarity, and you answer the question. So this simple act of visualizing and doing it over and over again produces some really remarkable outcomes. What's really important to know is that it's the conversations that are the important aspects, not just the models themselves. And these visual frames of reference can grow to several hundreds or even thousands of nodes. So one example is from an organization called Rodale, big publishing company. They lost a bunch of money one year, and their executive team for 3 days visualized their entire practice. And what's interesting is that after visualizing the entire business, systems upon systems, they reclaimed $50 million of revenue, and they also moved from a D rating to an A rating from their customers. Why? Because there's alignment from the executive team. So I'm now on a mission to help organizations solve their wicked problems by using collaborative visualization. On a site that I've produced called drawtoast.com, I've collected a bunch of the really, I think, best practices, and so you can learn how to run a workshop here. You can learn more about the visual language and the structure of links and nodes that you can apply to general problem solving, and download examples of various templates for unpacking the thorny problems that we all face in our organizations. So the seemingly trivial design exercise of drawing toast helps us get clear, engaged, and aligned. So next time you're confronted with an interesting challenge, remember what design has to teach us. Make your ideas visible, tangible, and consequential. It's simple, it's fun, it's powerful, and I believe it's an idea worth celebrating. Thank you.
So any thoughts about that?
Oh, feel free to chime in directly, answer Tom, or ping in the chat.
Yeah, if you can speak up, that'd be great. I think, you know, I don't know. I'm interested in what people think about the idea. The video itself synthesizes systems thinking with design thinking. He's, you know, and he's dealing with complex systems. When he talked about Rodale and its entire organization, that's a very complex system that they're dealing with. But mapping out ideas and design is helpful to them because, as he said, the importance is not the creation of the nodes and the connections, it's the conversations that happen around it. If anybody's done anything like impact mapping, Gosco Objects impact mapping, the same thing happens out of that exercise as well. When we start figuring out how things that we're going to deliver interact through agents in the system to try to realize an outcome or a goal, then we talk about a myriad of different things about that. And that's really at the core of design thinking as well. Design thinking never said you're going to find the single right design to solve a problem. The premise of it is you're going to find multiple potential solutions in design, and you're going to have to come to some kind of settlement on which one or ones you're actually going to take into development. And this comes from the lean startup mentality of A/B prototyping and A/B testing. You know, don't do it just one way, do it 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 ways. And then see what comes out of each of those paths of potential solution. But in lean startup, we start with a hypothesis, a problem statement. If anybody's watched the Spotify video, you'll see the, you know, radio you can save comes out of Henrik Nieberg's Spotify video. And that's the premise, or the hypothesis is they're examining how would you create the functionality and ability to save songs and so forth. And it's an elementary, seems like an elementary problem, but it certainly demonstrates the need to stay attuned to the hypothesis, because that's the problem you're trying to solve. And what happens a lot of times in design thinking, and this is why core facilitation is really critical to this, is it can go down paths that are so divergent that it's starting to part ways from the fundamental problem that you're trying to solve. And in exploration of ideas, that's not necessarily bad. However, if you lose focus of the problem you're trying to solve, then it can be bad. So that's the notion behind what he had here. And you can find that video on YouTube. That's where I found it. Making Toast, Tom Wujak. It's easy to find. And if you go to makingtoast.com, again, it's sort of similar to the website he had for the marshmallow exercise. Gives ideas about how you can use the exercise, sets up models, that sort of thing. So this is design thinking in a nutshell. But the thing I like about this particular graphic is that it's got lots of different tools associated with the different areas that we fundamentally utilize in design thinking, especially empathizing, ideating, and prototyping.
Tom, by the way, are you sharing?
I'm sorry, I am sharing, but I'm not sharing now. So let me share.
Sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Should be able to see it now.
Yep.
So this is the graphic, and you know, it's it's busy. I get it, but it's only busy because there are methods that are used in each of the areas.
Hey, Tom, this is Rusty.
Yeah, Rusty.
What's been your number one most effective method as a facilitator in a room full of people doing this skill set of getting them to, helping them to, inviting them to loosen up their creative juices and drop things like ego and reputation management and their worries about being an artist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's inhibitions that come with group, right? Especially group facilitation, drawing people out. In other words, enticing them to participate. And part of that is rewarding, right? And I'm not talking physical reward thing. I'm talking about, complimenting them, saying that's a wonderful idea. But the best way to get it is to get the group to interact with each other because lots of times when we're in groups like this, the group people know each other. They're at least familiar with each other. Once in a while, you gather a group together, especially in something like open space, and there isn't a strong connection among people. There's a strong connection to ideas, or visions, or the marketplace, whatever's up on the marketplace, problems, however you want to take it. So there's a connection to those. And you can use the common connection points to start to inspire people to come forward. And typically what you see is, the facilitator lots of times uses the old Montana cowboy mantra, never miss a good chance to shut up. Because sometimes you just let it go. And sometimes there can be some awkward silences. But typically when people are throwing ideas up on the wall, whether it's drawings or whether it's text, when they're doing that, ideas are being generated in their head, and you can't hurry that kind of activity. You have to let it generate. I think that's an important element here. Don't push them. Let them pull themselves along, and they will. If they're passionate about the problem space, they'll come forward. If they lack the passion, then you got a different problem, right? Engagement is not a result of being inhibited or shy, anything like that. It's a result of we just don't care, or we don't see this as a problem. So you have to understand as a facilitator and appreciate, is there a level of passion here that indicates strong feeling about the problem space and the need for a solution. And if that isn't present, you can't spuriously create it. I mean, you can't just, it's not like throwing gas on the fire and getting the fire really going. It'll either emerge or it won't. That was kind of protracted, Rusty, sorry, but.
Thanks.
Yeah. Design thinking uses familiar tools. If you go down to voltagecontrol.com, down there, they list a ton of tools in there. A lot of them are on that previous graphic that you saw. They use a variation of 5 whys called 9 whys. Design thinkers do. Of course, they use empathy maps, ideas, or open space and idea maps. Same thing, personas, where most of us are readily familiar with personas. They do the same thing in the empathy part at the very beginning of design thinking. They create personas. What they really want to fight is stereotyping personas and appreciating subtle differences between personas and persona subgroups. They use something called user journey mapping. When I went through the workshop, I associated this to user story mapping. So it's basically associated to the tasks that they do or the process that they would use in solving a problem or enablement of solving the problem. we're familiar with these different kinds of facilitation techniques, especially gaining agreement or finding cohesion, things like dot voting, Roman voting, ideation concepts like brainstorming, silent writing. In fact, he mentioned in the video, you really want to be effective, have them do it silently. And we found when we were doing story sizing that when we initially sized, we did it silently. Everybody, instead of playing planning poker and saying, this is that, and this is that, we silently did it. And then we would see what emerged, what patterns emerged out of the silent sizing that we did. And they use something called Scamper. I had never run across this before. It's an exercise where you do these, basically these 7 activities around design. How you might substitute a design thought with another thought, combining them, adapting, modifying. Is there other uses you can put them to? I'm not really all that familiar with the exercise. Somebody here might be, but I don't know it that well. But I did find the acronym and what they do, pretty interesting. Obviously, you can get educated in design thinking just about like every other thing that we have anymore. So I went through Florida State's design thinking workshop, was given through Illinois State University. We're going to incorporate it or incorporate our own design workshop in the innovation hub that we're going to create there. So places like MIT and Cornell have their own certificate programs for design thinking. They can be pretty expensive, as you can see here. IDEO has its own kind of university or schooling section. They have a foundations certificate in design thinking and an advanced certificate. They run about $1,000 each. So. And I think it's good to go through some type of workshop to get exposure to the practices and the kind of tools that are used, especially if you're going to do it virtually. There's no doubt that the community of the design thinking community has pretty much acknowledged, along with many other communities, that virtual association is not as effective as doing it in person. And we can have, our discussions and arguments over that, but that's my sense of what I hear coming out of this community when I'm monitoring the discussions in it. Is it's not that you cannot do it virtually, it's that it's difficult and not as effective to do it virtually. Lean thinking, usually you don't hear the word thinking after lean. Most people are familiar with lean. It was really created around manufacturing. Toyota is generally credited with it, creating it back in the 1950s. It basically goes back to the Toyota production system. Womack and Jones are credited with creating the term in their book Lean Thinking. I just pulled that book out of my bookcase here about an hour ago. I hadn't read it for a while, but that's where really the term became popularized, was out of their book. And they also discussed the elements of lean production along with another co-author, Dan Roos, in their book, The Machine That Changed the World. And they distilled lean down to 5 elements. Most people are familiar with these. Specify the value desired by the customer. So figure out what value means to the customer. Identify the stream of creation or production that delivers that value, and be ruthless about eliminating waste that is inherent in the process or steps or tasks needed to do that. You want to make sure that you have continuous production flow. One of the wastes is motion or is handoffs, things like that. So you want to try to fluidize your process flow so that it's as efficient and effective as possible. And they introduced the essence of pulling rather than pushing work. So this keeps the stream relatively stable all the way through if workers are allowed to pull work rather than having work pushed into a queue for them. We know that one of the wastes in lean is inventory. So, and then another core element to lean, as people know, is the essence of examining, self-examination, introspection, retrospection around continuous improvement of the processes. So how do we do things better all the time? And if you're familiar with Toyota and the TPS, that's ingrained in people who know the TPS. If you ask somebody who works within the TPS, they can't really describe the TPS or define it readily, but they know it. And you'll get the essence of the thinking of it when you talk with them. This is, one of probably hundreds of diagrams representing lean process thinking, the steps around it. And I'm sure lots of people have seen, different formats of this.
Tom, quick time check, 15 minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. So an essential element in lean is value stream mapping. People are familiar with this. What adds value, what doesn't add value, that is waste. And if you want a thorough discussion about it, the University of Cambridge's lean website is an excellent resource for it. So if you want to understand more in depth about what lean's all about, then you can do that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Lean and Lean Six Sigma are associated together, Lean and Six Sigma. Six Sigma has completely different, well, it has different motivations than Lean. It's about reduction of variation and defect rates. It goes back to Deming. But it theoretically seeks to eliminate 8 kinds of familiar waste that we see identified in lean. Most people are familiar with these wastes. They're associated typically with manufacturing. What happened was a couple of decades ago, Mary and Tom Popenick formulated a similar accounting of waste or lists of waste in software development or product development. So, and they mapped these against those wastes that we saw on the previous slide, but these are the wastes that they identified. So most people that are in software development that want to apply lean thinking focus on reduction or elimination of these kinds of wastes that you see here. And you can get educated in lean as well. So. And when Gene puts out the slides, you'll be able to see these links and so forth in there. The final thinking is systems thinking. So most people are familiar with what systems are, and systems can be open or closed. So systems thinking, interestingly, is the ability or skill to perform problem solving within complex systems. And people that have worked within the Cynefin framework know that systems can be categorized as ordered, complex, and chaotic. And then ordered systems can be further subcategorized as obvious and complicated. So a complex system is an entity with interrelated and interdependent parts called agents. They interact with each other. Changing one behavior of an agent or one part of a system affects other parts of the entire system, and usually unknowingly or unpredictably, although you can detect patterns that come out of it if you have enough observation time. And in chaotic systems, the effect of change is totally unpredictable. You can't be predicted at all. So And in ordered systems, these are systems that can be reduced, and their change can be predicted because they can be reduced to component parts that are readily understandable in how they interact with each other. An automobile engine is an example of a complicated but ordered system. Those parts work interchangeably, interactively, but they work according to a structured way. So changing one component of them will affect the system, but typically you can understand what the impact the change makes. And this is a little bit of history of systems thinking. As far as business and a social context, Jay Forrester at MIT was typically credited with the creation of that concept back in the mid-50s. Von Bertalanffy first conceptualized the thinking around organisms and biology back in the 1920s. And then recently, Dave Snowden has brought the thinking towards problem solving in what he calls the Cynefin sense-making framework. And this is, a lot of people are familiar with the sense-making of the Cynefin diagram. This is a perfect representation of it. And here's another one that's a little bit more robust, a little bit busier, but again, has the same elements and how you act when you're within that problem space. So the challenge is, what problem space are we in here? Are we in complex? Are we in ordered? Or is it chaos? And of course, if you're in the center here in disorder, you don't know where you're at. You have no appreciation. That's why in sense making, you try to get out of here and you try to figure out where you're gonna, where you're residing in the framework, in the domains. And we saw that already. And you can get educated in systems thinking too. So Dave Snowden, I've taken his Cognitive Edge introductory training in person, was good. It's nice to hear Dave talk. He's a doctor, but he can talk on the average level. So, and there's other places like MIT, Cornell, and Harvard. And the relationships of the thinkings, you saw that in the Wojcik video, right? So you incorporate lots of elements of design thinking and systems thinking. When you get into there, typically lean is something that you incorporate when you're looking at your process or the product that you're building as far as whether there's waste in it. So I really see the most symbiotic relationship between systems thinking and design thinking. I see lean more as a process-driven check on whether we have waste within either our processes or in the development of the product. Any discussion, questions, or insights about what we've got?
By the way, thank you, Tom. Folks, we got 8 minutes remaining, 7 or so. The floor is open, so could you please, in fact, instead of typing, just ask if you have any questions for Tom.
Hey, Tom.
Yep.
Adam here.
Yeah.
So, if you wouldn't mind, could you throw that last slide back up that had the interrelationships? Because I was trying to even type into the chat earlier while you were showing it. Like, you described design thinking and systems thinking as more similar than different. Maybe different than what you said. And that lean is a separate. Do you feel they're both under the umbrella of systems thinking, or do you think that lean, like they're just distant cousins of those things?
Yeah, I don't see lean. I guess what I say is I think that systems thinking and design thinking are more symbiotically connected than lean is to either one of them. So right in here, it says lean and design are practice and process based. But I think in connection with systems theory and philosophy based. mean, certainly Snowden has presented a model for how you apply systems thinking and problem solving context, but it's more theoretical or more abstract than what you see in design. Design thinking has specific steps you go through, right? And lean as well. When you're doing value stream mapping, you're going through specific identification steps. I mean, there's a philosophy behind lean. Let's keep waste to a minimum or eliminate it. Let's constantly improve. We know those kinds of things, but there's activities that we do, such as value stream mapping, where we start going in and rooting out where we see waste. So my point is that in design thinking, we're really examining the system very closely, and we know we're going to alter the system. We know we are, because we're trying to solve a problem within a system. But we know we're going to solve it, or we're going to alter it. If it's a complex system, we have to be careful about what emerges out of any kind of alteration that we make.
Yeah, I think I was asking the question, and your answer is totally acceptable and right. I think I was thinking that there's lean thinking, and then I've been through lean transformation where there are more organizational systems types things that get put in place over top, and I think I need to just pull those two apart in my head.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Thanks.
Right. Yeah, because you're applying lean within a system, right? A production system, manufacturing system, development system. You're applying those attributes of lean in there, those practices, if you will. And if you don't have a fundamental understanding that, if we mess around with the system here, things are going to happen that we can't predict, and we got to be careful. And that's why Snowden has often said this, you can push a system into chaos easily, without really understanding that you're doing so. When we used to do exploration or R&D in the company I was in, got somebody talking over. When we were doing R&D in the company, we used to sequester that environment away, technical environment, so we didn't blow anything up. Other questions?
Folks, feel free to turn the cameras on and ask if you feel.
I think we got about 3 minutes, Gene, so.
Yep.
Yep.
Let's use them.
And we could, it's hard to do this topic justice in an hour. I mean, each of these.
I have a question.
Sorry, go ahead, Carol.
Yes, my question was if you could go back to the slide on reducing waste. I believe that was on lean thinking, the 7 ways of software development, slide 14. Could you just expatiate some more on that? Some ways you've seen probably a team reduce, the waste in their workflow using, lean thinking?
Yeah, let me share this. So I'm not going to go back to the, so it was up in the lean area?
Correct.
Yeah.
I think she said slide 14, maybe.
Yes, 14.
Almost there. Sorry. Right here. Is this it?
Correct.
Yeah. This is this graphic has been around for nearly 20 years now. And we incorporated it immediately into our work where I was at, because we readily understood that if you eliminate, so here's a problem we ran into. Everybody wanted product delivered faster, right? And Agile was going to be the magic to do that. And then we came to the realization that Agile is really about creating better products. It's not about doing work faster. You want to do work faster, get rid of these wastes. And that's what we told our management. We go, your job, just like it is at Toyota, is to get rid of these wastes right here. So get rid of them. So don't have people task switching. Put people on dedicated teams. Make sure we have time to do the work correctly so we don't introduce defects. Stop handoffs, because handoffs result in delays. I said, you want to go faster? You have to reorganize your processes. Not your people aren't going to think any faster. They're not going to type any faster. That's just not going to happen. So that's why we started focusing on this. Don't overdevelop features. If you've ever seen Henrik Nieberg's video on product ownership, when that thing starts to level out at the top and you've delivered the most valuable features, stop delivering. Don't deliver incremental features that don't add the necessary value that it takes to build them, to overcome the expense of building them. So this is the sense of how we think about lean when we're doing product development, right? And we used to have this list up on our board in our team rooms, up on the wall in our team rooms.
Tom, wouldn't you say that the emphasis here, though, different, like to tie this back to like manufacturing or more operational, like lean waste, is that like software development waste here, you're trying to improve flow, like for the team, as opposed to saying like misunderstanding, like removing this waste means that they're coding more hours a day, which I think is the point you made, right? So it's not increasing their productivity. It's about increasing flow is how I would think about this.
Yeah, exactly. So when we think about product development, we're thinking about flow here, right? And flow being continuous, unimpeded, and cyclical. So you got cycle time, right? But how long does it take you to produce a piece of functionality? And what's stopping you along the way or interrupting you along the way in doing that? So cycle time is a huge thing. And when it comes to product development, how long is it taking you to get features out? And cycle time can be reduced simply by reducing the size of features. We could talk about this all day long, Gene.
Thank you, Tom. So folks, we're at the time, we're at the hour, and I think we are going to, wrap this up at the moment. I really wanted to thank you, Tom, on behalf of everyone else for coming out and doing this for us. We will have the recording available for everyone, maybe in a couple of hours, but tonight, the latest, I will share with the community. Tom's information is also available. Contact info, the slides will be all available on the links that I have. Let me ping it one more time in the chat room for whatever it's worth. You can bookmark this page, and we'll probably see all the assets later. In fact, the deck is already there. The video, the recording will be there by tonight. So look out for next events on Large Scale Scrum Meetup. Thank you very much, you all, for joining. And Tom, once again, thank you. If there is any appetite to have a follow-up on one of the above, I'll check with you separately. And if you are still interested and available, gratefully, we'll have you back.
And anybody's welcome to reach out to me, Gene, if they want to talk further or have a more discussion.
Absolutely. The link that I just shared has your contact information, contact links. Please reach out to Tom directly. You don't need me or the meetup to reach out to Tom directly. So thank you all. Have a great the rest of the weekend, or if you headed into Monday already, if you're in the very Eastern time zone, enjoy the week ahead of you. Thank you all. Be safe, and I'll see you around next time.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you, Marcelo.
Also,
Good to see you.
bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.